Have you noticed how the strongest people you know silently fall apart alone? The ones who carry everyone else's burdens, who never flinch when someone needs them, are often the same ones who collapse quietly behind closed doors. And if you look closely, you'll see it in the small moments, the way someone stares out of a window late at night, pretending to admire the city lights, when in reality they're trying to hold themselves together. The friend who listens to everyone's secrets yet never shares their own. The person who can solve everyone's crises except the ones that live inside them. You begin to wonder why some hearts become shelters for others, yet homeless for themselves. You don't choose this pattern. It grows inside you quietly, like a shadow you never learned to name. Perhaps you've felt it too, the strange, suffocating instinct to stay quiet when you're hurting. The invisible voice inside that whispers you'll only burden people if you speak. You. Convince yourself that your silence is strength, that swallowing your pain makes you noble, resilient, admirable. But beneath that mask lies a truth few dare to acknowledge. You're not trying to be strong, you're trying to survive. Why does it feel safer to drown quietly than raise a hand? Why does asking for help feel like stepping into a spotlight you never wanted? There is a moment often in childhood when you learned that your needs were too heavy for someone, that your emotions came at the wrong time, that your pain made someone uncomfortable. Maybe you grew up comforting adults who should have been comforting you. Maybe every cry for help echoed into silence. Maybe you learned that when you opened your heart, someone walked away. So you stitched yourself together, learned to never ask twice, learned that self-reliance was the only safe place to stand. Neuroscience says the brain remembers emotional wounds more vividly than physical ones. The amygdala fires not only at danger you can see, but at danger you once felt. Asking for help feels dangerous because somewhere in your wiring, vulnerability is tied to shame, rejection, disappointment. So you build an identity around independence, not because it empowers you, but because it protects you from being hurt again. But this protection comes with a cost. You become the hero in everyone's story, but a ghost in your own. You pour from an empty cup, hoping no one notices the cracks. You break in silence because silence is the only language you were ever taught for your pain. And to understand how this silence began, this lifelong habit of swallowing your needs, we must return to the first place where your voice trembled, and someone taught you it was safer not to speak at all. Have you ever wondered when you first learned to stay quiet about your pain? It doesn't happen in adulthood. It begins much earlier, in small, fragile moments when you were too young to understand what you were learning, yet old enough to feel the consequences deeply. You can picture a child, maybe one a little too mature for their age, tiptoeing around a home where emotions were landmines. Their needs weren't just ignored, they were treated as inconveniences. So the child adapts. They swallow their tears, soften their voice, shrink themselves to fit into the broken spaces the adults around them left behind. Perhaps you were that child who ended up comforting a crying mother, patting her back with tiny hands, whispering that everything would be okay, while your own fear trembled beneath your skin. You learned early that your emotions weren't the priority. Your job was to be strong for someone who was supposed to be strong for you. Or maybe you were taught that good kids don't cause trouble, so you hid every bruise on your heart to keep the peace, believing that even the smallest complaint made you unworthy of love. Some children face something even heavier: parents who were physically present but emotionally absent, leaving silence as the only language spoken between you. Neuroscience shows that a child's brain wires itself around the emotional availability of their caregivers. When comfort is unreliable, your nervous system learns to shut down before it learns to speak up. You begin to believe that asking for help is a threat, a risk, a door that leads to disappointment. So your mind protects you by teaching you the simplest survival rule. If you don't ask for help, you can't be rejected. If you don't reach out, you can't be forgotten. If you don't need anyone, no one can hurt you. This is how hyper-independence begins, not as a personality trait, but as a shield forged in childhood. The shield feels protective at first. You wear it proudly, even though it's heavier than anything a child should have to carry. You stop crying. You stop asking. You stop expecting. Every unmet need becomes a quiet promise to yourself. Never again will I risk this kind of pain. But the cost is subtle and lasting. Without realizing it, the child grows into someone who can't identify their own needs, someone who apologizes before they speak, someone who learned to give endlessly but silently doubts whether they deserve anything in return. And so this early silence becomes a blueprint, an emotional architecture that adulthood simply builds upon. And so, without knowing it, the child grows up wearing a mask, one they never learned to take off. Have you ever wondered how easily you learn to hide your own pain? How naturally you slip into the role of the dependable one, the strong one, the one who never asks, never burdens, never breaks? It's almost effortless now. The way you tighten your smile, even when your chest feels like it's collapsing inward. You move through adulthood, wearing a mask so convincing that even you forget it's there. You become the friend everyone relies on, the one who answers phone calls at midnight, who gives advice. You've never allowed yourself to receive. You become the partner who never complains, the colleague who works through exhaustion so deep it feels like gravity is pulling you apart. People praise your strength, your stability, your resilience, but they never see the shadow following just a step behind you, the pile of unmet needs you've learned to outrun. Your childhood survival instinct evolves into something elegant but dangerous, an identity built on self-sacrifice. The same silence that once protected you becomes the monster within, whispering that your feelings are too much, that needing anything makes you weak. You've spent so long taking care of others that you don't know how to place the oxygen mask on yourself. You help others breathe while slowly suffocating inside your own armor so unbreakable it begins to feel like a prison. Neuroscience calls it emotional suppression, a habit formed so early that the brain begins to treat vulnerability like a threat. Attachment theory calls it avoidant coping, a way of loving from a distance, even when you desperately crave connection. Your mind learned long ago that needing others leads to disappointment. So now, even when someone offers support, your body stiffens, your voice tightens, your instinct says, "I'm fine." You want help, but you flinch from receiving it. You want to be held, yet you retreat into yourself. You crave closeness, but protect yourself from it. With the same intensity, a wounded animal guards a scar that never healed properly. So you carry everything alone. You collapse silently after helping everyone stand. You break only where no one can see. And the contradiction is almost cruel. The more capable you appear, the less anyone suspects you need anything at all. Hyper-independence becomes the mask, the identity, the shield that keeps you from being hurt and keeps you from being truly known. But beneath that carefully managed strength lies a truth your heart has, never forgotten. You're tired. Not from living, but from living without help. And there is a deeper layer to this one, rooted in the biology of fear and the psychology of self-worth. Have you ever noticed how your body reacts the moment you even think about asking for help? It's subtle at first, a tightening in your chest, a stiffness in your throat, a strange heat behind your eyes. It feels almost like danger, as if reaching out might trigger something catastrophic, and in a way, your brain believes it will. That's the haunting truth behind silent suffering. It isn't just emotional, it's biological. Your childhood didn't just shape your memories, it shaped your nervous system. When you grew up in an environment where vulnerability was ignored, punished, or misunderstood, your brain learned to associate expressing needs with threat. Neuroscience calls this an avoidant attachment style, a survival pattern where independence becomes safer than intimacy. You learned early that love might not come when you reached for it, so your brain rewired itself to stop reaching altogether. Inside your mind, the amygdala, the region responsible for detecting danger, fires not only when you face physical harm, but also when you feel emotionally exposed. For someone else, asking for help might be a gentle gesture. For you, it feels like stepping into a burning spotlight. Your body floods with stress hormones. Your heart races. Your thoughts spiral. Vulnerability doesn't feel like connection. It feels like a trap. Over time, this becomes something psychologists call learned helplessness. If your cries for support were ignored enough times as a child, your brain eventually concluded there was no point in trying. It didn't matter how loudly you needed help, the world had already shown you it wouldn't answer. So now, even as an adult, your mind whispers the same message. Stay quiet, stay strong, stay invisible. Hyper-independence becomes your armor, a trauma response disguised as competence. You convince yourself it's strength, that doing everything alone makes you powerful. But beneath that armor, your nervous system is constantly bracing for impact, always scanning for disappointment, always preparing for someone to let you down. And ironically, the very system designed to protect you ends up imprisoning you. Studies show that during emotional neglect, a child's mirror neurons of the circuits responsible for empathy, connection, and co-regulation dim their activity. When no one mirrors your pain, you lose the internal blueprint for sharing it. You grow up not knowing how to receive comfort because your brain never learned the map. So your mind plays a cruel trick. It tells you you're safer alone, even as loneliness slowly eats away at you. It frames self-reliance as virtue, even as it drains your emotional oxygen. It convinces you that needing nothing will save you, even as it starves your heart of what it was built to receive. But every defense has a shadow, and this silence carries one of the darkest. Have you ever noticed how the strongest people often carry the deepest fractures, the ones nobody else can see? You watch yourself becoming that person, the one who builds walls so high and so carefully that you mistake them for shelter. But over time, those same walls turn into a prison, trapping you inside a silence you once believed was strength. There comes a point where refusing help is no longer resilience, it becomes erosion. It happens slowly, quietly. You move through your days with a lantern burning in your hands, but each night, the room around you grows darker. You convince yourself you're fine, that you're coping, that you're unshakable. But your inner world begins to dim in places no one else can touch. There's a voice inside you, small and trembling, begging for relief. Yet it speaks only in whispers because you never learned how to let it be heard. People who never ask for help don't just suffer, they decay. They bend themselves into impossible shapes to accommodate everyone else's needs, yet feel guilty the moment they imagine asking for anything in return. You become a giver, overflowing into the world, but slowly drying out inside, like a garden without water. You enter relationships where you pour yourself empty, hoping someone will see your hunger without you having to speak it. But silence doesn't invite rescue, it invites misunderstanding. And so you give everything, receive nothing, and tell yourself this is what you deserve. The emotional toll is heavy. You begin to feel resentment toward others for not reading your mind, shame toward yourself for wanting more, and exhaustion that settles deep in your bones. The monster within you isn't anger or bitterness, it's depletion. It's the slow, quiet dying that happens when you spend your life strong for everyone but weak for yourself. Psychology calls it self-abandonment, the moment your independence stops protecting you and starts suffocating you. You stop resting. You stop feeling. You stop expecting. You dismiss your own pain so automatically that you forget it exists until one day it bursts through the cracks, overwhelming you in a wave of grief you can't explain. And you break not loudly, but in the quiet ways that leave you feeling invisible, even to yourself. Yet here is the cruel twist. The world praises you for this. People admire your calmness, your reliability, your unshakable facade. They call you strong because they've never seen you cry. They think your silence is discipline, not despair, and every compliment becomes another brick in the walls you can't escape. And yet, society praises them, making the silence even deeper. Have you ever noticed how easily the world applauds you when you stay quiet about your pain? It's strange, almost cruel, how society glorifies the person who never asks for help, who never breaks in public, who never lets the weight in their chest show. You grow up surrounded by subtle messages that teach you silence is strength and vulnerability is a flaw. Strong people don't complain. Good men don't cry. Good women take care of others first. These aren't just phrases. They become rules etched into your bones before you even understand what they mean. You see it in childhood stories, the hero who never needs saving, the warrior who stands alone at the edge of a cliff, the parent who sacrifices everything without ever expressing their own struggle. You learn to admire the characters who suffer silently, who endure without asking, who turn their wounds into weapons, and without realizing it, you begin to shape yourself into the same hollow ideal. Maybe you were praised for being a good child, the one who didn't cause trouble, who handled everything quietly, who never demanded attention. People admired how mature you were, how independent you seemed. But no, one wondered what it cost you to be that way. No one asked whether silence was a choice or a survival instinct. As you grow older, society continues reinforcing this pattern. You're admired for being reliable, for being the one everyone can call when they're falling apart. You become the emotional paramedic in every relationship, patching wounds you've never allowed yourself to acknowledge. And each compliment, each "you're so strong," feels like a warm hand on your shoulder and a tightening chain around your throat at the same time. Because the truth is, the world rewards your silence only because it benefits from it. People love the version of you that never needs anything, that never disrupts their comfort, that absorbs burdens like a sponge soaking up spilled water. You become addicted to the praise, to the image of being unshakable, to the illusion of being needed. Being the helper becomes your identity. Being the savior becomes your worth. But the cost is devastating. The more you give, the more invisible your own needs become. You become a lighthouse guiding others home while your own foundation erodes quietly beneath the waves. You carry the world on your shoulders, but no one sees how your knees shake under the weight. And the cruelest irony is that the world never notices the cracks until you collapse, because your silence taught it not to look. But there's a price for carrying the world alone, and it eventually becomes unbearable. Have you ever been in a room full of people and still felt like you were disappearing? It's a strange kind of loneliness, the kind that doesn't come from being alone, but from never feeling seen. When you spend your entire life carrying yourself, comforting yourself, healing yourself, something inside you begins to quietly unravel. At first it's subtle, like a soft ache under the ribs, a heaviness behind the eyes. But over the years, it grows into a constant hum of emptiness you can't quite name. Chronic loneliness doesn't arrive suddenly, it creeps in through the spaces where connection should live. You can be sitting beside someone you love, their arm touching yours, their laughter filling the room, yet you feel miles away, as if a sheet of glass separates you from the warmth you cannot enter. Your heart knows how to hold others with such tenderness, but when you try to hold yourself, your hands feel empty. You've been strong for so long that you forget what softness feels like. The exhaustion is not just physical, it's emotional, spiritual, the kind that makes you want to sleep, not because you're tired, but because consciousness feels too heavy. You can slip into depressive episodes without anyone noticing, not even the people closest to you. You become so practiced at hiding your pain that you start hiding it from yourself. And somewhere in the silent corners of your mind, a monster grows, a creature made from unexpressed fears, swallowed, disappointments, and years of pretending you didn't need anyone. Burnout becomes your shadow, following you from room to room. You do everything you're supposed to do: work, responsibilities, relationships, yet everything feels dimmed, muted. Your emotions don't disappear, they just stop reaching the surface. Even joy becomes something you observe rather than experience. And trust? Trust becomes a foreign language. When no one has ever held your vulnerability, you begin to believe no one can. Psychologists call it emotional numbing, a state where your inner world shuts down to protect you from hurt. But protection has a side effect. It also blocks the possibility of being held, understood, or loved in the ways you secretly crave. You become invisible not because people can't see you, but because you've learned to erase yourself before anyone gets close enough to notice you're trembling. And yet, beneath all of this, there is still a small pulse inside you, a faint longing for connection that refuses to die. You feel it in the quiet moments, the wish that someone would place a hand on your shoulder, the fantasy of being able to say, "I'm not okay," and not be afraid of what comes next. But silence is not destiny. There is a way slow, gentle, and human. Have you ever wondered why accepting help feels heavier than carrying everything alone? It's strange how lifting your own world seems easier than letting someone lift even a corner of it. But healing doesn't begin with grand declarations or dramatic breakthroughs. It begins quietly, almost invisibly, in moments small enough to slip under your defenses. It begins when you ask someone to hold a door for you, even though you could have managed. It begins when you let a friend sit beside you in silence without pretending you're fine. It begins when you admit, just once, that you're tired, not because you want pity, but because your truth deserves air. These tiny cracks in your armor are not weaknesses, they are openings. They are the first breaths after years of drowning in your own strength. Psychology says the nervous system changes through co-regulation. Your body learns safety by being around people who feel safe. When you allow someone to offer you comfort, no matter how small, you teach your brain a new language. The amygdala softens. The threat response loosens its grip. The monster within quiets. You begin to rewrite the script you were given long ago, the one that said your needs were burdens and your emotions were too loud. Maybe you practice emotional honesty with one person. You let them see the flicker of your fear, the tremor behind your smile. And when they don't run, something shifts inside you. A shadow you've carried for years becomes lighter, not because it disappears, but because it is finally shared. Healing isn't about becoming fearless, it's about letting someone walk with you despite the fear. You learn to choose. Relationships that feel like soft ground rather than sharp edges. People who don't praise your silence but welcome your truth. People who don't admire your invincibility but honor your humanity. And with them, you begin to allow imperfection, the forgotten art of being real, without collapsing into shame. You stop equating worth with usefulness. You stop believing love must be earned through self-sacrifice. You stop shrinking yourself to protect others from the weight of your feelings. Slowly, gently, you learn that receiving is not taking, it is connecting. It is the exchange that makes relationships alive. The world becomes less hostile, less hollow. You begin to feel the warmth of being supported instead of merely being admired. This is not fixing yourself. This is reclaiming yourself, rediscovering that you were never meant to hold everything alone. That being held is not a luxury, it is a human necessity. And slowly, the person who never asked learns the courage to be seen. Have you ever stopped for a moment, just one quiet breath, and wondered why you believe you must hold the entire world alone? It's almost heartbreaking how naturally you bear the weight of burdens that were never meant to rest solely on your shoulders. You move through life with a calm face, an unwavering tone, a steady presence that others lean on without ever noticing how tired you've become. And yet, you keep going, as if the universe appointed you the guardian of everyone else's storms while leaving you to weather your own in silence. There's a certain nobility in the way you endure, but also a quiet tragedy. You didn't choose to become this way. Life shaped you into someone who survives by carrying everything inward. You learn to be your own protector, your own anchor, your own healer. And somewhere along the way, you began to mistake isolation for strength, silence for endurance, self-sacrifice for love. You convinced yourself that needing nothing made you too unbreakable. But the truth is gently, painfully different. Even the strongest souls grow weary when no one ever sees their trembling. There is a moment often late at night when the world feels distant, where your heart whispers a truth you've spent years avoiding. It tells you that human beings were never designed to be islands, that even the toughest armor cracks without care. That strength is not measured by how much you can hold, but by how deeply you allow yourself to be held. Psychology calls it co-regulation. Philosophy calls it interdependence. The soul simply calls it belonging. Picture a mountain, a symbol the world worships for its strength. It stands tall, unmoved, unshaken, yet even the mountain leans on the earth beneath it. Even the mountain needs support. And you, with all your resilience, all your hidden wounds, all your quiet courage, are no different. You were never meant to carry life alone. The idea that you must endure in silence is not wisdom, it is a myth, handed to you by a society that praises stoicism but forgets the cost. Your worth is not in what you provide, but in who you are when you allow yourself to be human. When you let someone sit beside you in the darkness, when you let your voice tremble instead of swallowing it whole, when you allow your heart to be held, even if only gently, even if only for a moment. One day, perhaps soon, you will look back and realize that the bravest thing you ever did was not surviving alone, but allowing connection to soften the edges of your loneliness. Because strength is not the absence of need. Strength is the courage to be known. And now, your story continues, the story of someone learning not to carry life, but to share it.